In a world where people argue about how VR games should be made, whether third-person games are acceptable or it's not real VR if it's DualShock only, somehow a tiny mouse born out of Seattle, Washington, put all the quarreling aside. For one brief moment, we all peered into Quill's world and agreed that this game was something special. But it's been 4 years since we last saw her, and the question on everyone's mind is whether Moss Book 2 has what it takes to compete in a much different VR market. Spoilers, the answer is yes. Moss Book 2 picks up exactly where the first game left off, so if you're wondering whether or not you should play the first game first, yeah, do it. Not only is it $10 cheaper than Quill's second outing, but you also have a much better understanding of the story thus far. Book 2 recaps it nicely in storybook form, but it doesn't hold a candle to playing through it yourself. And Book 2 doesn't just pick up where Book 1 left off, it actually feels like you're still playing Book 1. You're in the exact same place with the exact same dead boss on the ground, and everything looks, plays, and sounds exactly the same. There's a weird sense of comfort in that, like you're returning back home and nothing has changed, which is so seldom the case in real life or entertainment. But it doesn't stay that way for too long, just long enough for you to wonder if Polyarc literally just made a whole bunch of DLC and then tried to sell it to us as a new game. Which, don't worry, I assure you that is absolutely not the case here. But just as you're getting to that point, you start looking around and realize that the worlds are so much more fleshed out artistically. Every area is bigger and uses multiple camera angles, to the point where it frequently loses the diorama feel of the original. And now you just feel like a tiny mouse in a giant world, all of which creates a sense of scale that was always present in Moss, but only now fully realized. The soundtrack feels more fully realized here too. There are plenty of times where the music takes a backseat in order to let the ambient noises of the world shine, but when it kicks in, the more adventurous parts feel way more adventurous. The treacherous parts feel way more treacherous. Along with all of that, once you start learning new abilities, Moss Book 2 finally begins to feel like its own game. You've got a brand new inventory system, new weapons, charge attacks, new ways to solve puzzles, and as the reader, you're suddenly a much more important part of Quill's journey. Being able to grow lattices for Quill to climb and bridges for her to cross aren't just new ways forward, but also create brand new puzzles for you to solve in first person. I'm not totally sure that Moss fans are tuning into Book 2 specifically for the platforming or combat, but both remain par for the course, which means you'll occasionally curse the game for an unfair death or grow tired of being locked in a room, forced to fight wave after wave of enemies. It's all fine, and there's certainly a degree of skill involved to be successful, but I think the real draw here are the puzzles. Now let's be clear, I think Moss Book 2 is a fairly easy game, and I only get stumped maybe 2 or 3 times total. You'll breeze through most of the puzzles pretty quickly, which I think is good for this game. It sets a really nice pace and keeps you wanting to play. But occasionally you will walk into a room, see multiple exits, a whole lot of contraptions and control plates, and just think, damn, I'm going to be here for a while. And you will. I took my time playing through, collected a good number of the scrolls, but I didn't backtrack or explore nearly as much as I would have liked. So if you're playing the way I did, between the new puzzles, the longer story, exploration, and a few new Metroidvania elements, you're looking at a 6-hour adventure minimum, which is easily 50% longer than the original. I've got to say that being back in that iconic library, hunched over a book and turning the pages as the narrator reads me the story in VR. I mean, I'm the guy who hated standing in the Saints and Sinners bus staring at the radio. But it's a good feeling here, and Polyarc did something special. The library changes with the story, and suddenly I felt like the people who made this game are just as obsessed with the never-ending story as I am. That I'm Bastion peering into the world of Fantasia, intimately connected with Atreyu and Artax on their quest to stop the Nothing, and all the things that are happening to them are affecting me too. Just me? Am I alone here? Okay, so it's not quite on that level, but it is crazy that I felt almost none of that in Book 1, and so much of it here. In fact, all the new additions to the sequel make it feel like a more fleshed out game, which retroactively also makes Moss Book 1, dare I say it, a bit more shallow by comparison. I do have to say that Moss Book 2 doesn't take nearly the number of risks that I would have liked for the sequel, but playing it safe still meant that Polyarc managed to improve on nearly every aspect of the first game. It's a beautiful game with an awesome soundtrack and another heartfelt story. It's unlikely the additions to the gameplay will rope in anyone who wasn't enthralled by the original, but for the millions of people who were, Moss Book 2 is an absolutely essential follow-up.